My name is Gabriel Nuñez-Soria. Yo soy Chicano. I am Chicano mestizo of mixed European and Native American indigenous ancestry. My mother's ancestors hail from Ireland, Scotland, and England, and my father's from Mexico. It is my Chicano and Celtic roots that inform my embrace of indigenous ways of being and knowing. As metaphor of the mirror of our mind as a means to inform and inspire reflection resonates with my understanding of the Mexica philosophy of Tezcatlipoca. Tezcatlipoca represents those things that are shrouded in darkness, one instance being that of a smoking obsidian mirror, representing our inability to fully see and comprehend our own consciousness. Both of these mirror metaphors refer to how our sense of self is constructed as a reflection of ourselves in relationship with other people. Inoue emphasizes our need to undergo deep reflection of our personal theories, which requires, I argue, connection to community. In Lakesh, you are my other me, tú eres mi otro yo, a Mayan symbol of interconnectedness, is another example of how we can see and understand ourselves in relationship to our community. Many of the features of Japanese education presented in our class speak to the importance of communal connection in Japanese culture and life. Osoji and Kyoshoku are two standouts. Both practices promote collective, interactive service, support, and learning. The Japanese lesson planning methodology is another powerful example of community praxis that is strikingly different from models in the US educational system, which tend to focus on individual teachers in their individual classrooms. Another example that comes to mind is the empathetic pedagogy of Mr. Kanamori. While we did hear that Mr. Kanamori's approaches are not the norm in Japanese classrooms, I cannot help but be inspired by his willingness to be consistently present with his students. As Mario pointed out in his discussion post this week, Kanamori's pedagogical methods and practices are similar to restorative justice practices, or RJP. Restorative justice practices, or RJP, are based on indigenous First Peoples ways of being. RJP grew out of Native peoples' demands for an end to the disproportionate incarceration of their community members and youth, and their offer of an alternative paradigm to the standard punitive system. The medicine wheel is another North American indigenous symbol, framework, and physical structure. It is utilized in many Native ceremonies and can represent many different elements of life: the four directions, all people and relations, strength, health, clarity, and knowledge, and our four domains of health and humanity: physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. Omoi, our integrated expression of intellect, emotion, and passion, is an indigenous Japanese notion of oneness, wholeness of human experience and well-being. Omoi resonates with me as a form of wisdom that empowers us to be our whole self, rather than focus solely on our mind and intellect, stuck in our head and disconnected from our heart, body, and spirit. While Inoue highlights the importance of Jikan, of gut feeling, as fundamental to our connection to an expression of Omoi, I wonder a little about how he juxtaposes intellect and emotion. Inoue states on page 11, quote, "Please note that your personal theories may not be completely rational, since personal theories are grounded in your Jikan," end quote. Can any human theory, whether personal or collective, be completely rational? Let's be careful not to uphold the dominant view of valuing logic over emotion, as there are no human logics, constructs, or concepts that are not intrinsically and simultaneously both emotional and intellectual. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's work demonstrates that we cannot make decisions without emotional connection and content. Please do not take my stance to mean that I think we should act on extreme emotions. Rather, let's be aware that our emotions, like our thoughts, are always at play, always present, and have the same potential to teach us and betray us as our thoughts do. Based on my omoi, I find myself focusing on Inoue's embrace of holistic views of our human experience. Repressing our emotions is detrimental to our health. Even though conservative and neoliberal ideologies would have us believe that it is possible to repress and remove our emotions from human endeavor to be purely intellectual, it's not. This belief in pure rational thought is a Eurocentric attack on irrational logics, leading to false claims of objectivity and neutrality. I look to the materials in our class to inspire my continued path of humanizing and indigenizing our pedagogical practices. I would like to leave us with a call for our recognition of our interconnectedness. Let's look again at Inlakesh, this time next to yin and yang, both representing balance, harmony, interconnectedness. It is not a coincidence that these two images share similarities. Interconnectedness and the embrace of community and the cycles of life are simply human. We see it in Ubuntu, An indigenous African philosophy of the universal bond that connects all humanity, sometimes translated as "I am because we are," or as Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, "My humanity is inextricably bound up in yours." We can also look to the Celtic tree of life, an indigenous recognition of the cycle of life and death that all of us are bound up in. It is imperative that we embrace these indigenous humanizing practices and ways of being so that we can counteract the dehumanizing practices of the capitalist, colonial, industrial model of schooling. The Japanese educational practices that embrace ideas of interconnectedness and community are powerful examples of simple methods to promote community, human connection, and healing. Here in the US, we still have a lot of work to do. Thank you.